Everything started during our first class trip to collect specimens. I'm not sure what I was expecting really, if anything. I was certainly hoping for something that might inspire an idea for a thesis at least. The deadline to submit a topic is just a week away from tomorrow, and it felt like everyone else already had one at that point. We'd all seen pictures of the DPF, of course, both in the trip's description packet and in the obscenely overpriced textbooks used in the class. It was just as bleak and hopeless looking as we were expecting it to look. Barren, rounded hills of stone surrounded flat valleys devoid of even the hardiest forms of life. When the wind blew through the canyons, it would whistle and howl like a mournful ghost trapped in the valley since days long forgotten. It was a stark, unashamed beauty that dared you to be repulsed by how dead it looked. It hadn't always looked this way. 75 million years ago, it was a lush, thriving ecosystem, teeming with creatures the likes of which no one has ever seen before. Bordered by giant mountains to the west and a shallow sea to the east, the bygone floodplains were home to dinosaurs and other types of prehistoric animals. This group of rocks, known as the Dinosaur Park Formation, is one of the richest fossil-bearing rock formations in North America. Professor Curry led us down a barely beaten path to a small alcove nestled between two walls of white stone to set up camp. There were even a few pieces of trash left over from previous class trips. Our first round of excavation began the next day, right around noon or so. You have to wait until well into the day to begin digging, because you need the light to help pick up the fossils from the surrounding rock. It was practically graduation when Professor Curry handed me my pickaxe and told me to start digging into a cliff on the south side. 3 blisters, 2 sunburns, and God knows how many beads of sweat later, I found my first fossil. Nothing special at all, really, just what Professor Curry called Chunkosaurus, an unidentifiable fragment of bone. It was shaped like my thumb, and only half the size. I could tell that it was from a dinosaur because of the hollowed-out honeycomb-like structure, but apart from that, there was no way to tell what kind of creature it came from. Fossils of this kind are very common in places like the DPF, as evidenced by the number of other students who also found bits and pieces of Chunkosaurus all over the cliff. Despite their limited, fragmentary nature, each one made Professor Curry smile with delight as he examined them with his fingers. Cool as they were, the novelty wore off quickly as the number of aches and pains began to climb. As our spirits were starting to fall with the setting sun, one of the students found something. At first, we all thought it was just another piece of Chunkosaurus, but Curry's reaction told otherwise. He called out to all of us to come look. We looked at the spot where the surrounding white stone had been picked away and saw stark, black rock lying underneath. It was as deep and brilliant as obsidian, but the texture was rough, like granite. It wasn't like anything we went over in class, and that included the professor. As Curry held fine black grains in his hands, he stared at them with an expression that mixed confusion with fascination. Without speaking, he picked up a hammer and chisel and began to mindlessly chip away at the overlaying rock. More black stone was revealed underneath. It was a rather strange note to end our first day on. Curry decided to refocus our efforts for the next day on excavating the black rock and see what we might find. That day came and went, with more of the mysterious black rock being revealed hidden beneath the cliff face. On the third day, we found the first bits of Chunkosaurus preserved in the rock, looking as if the bits of bone were covered in soot. These pieces looked even more broken and fragmented than usual. The largest pieces were no bigger than an apple, though many were found articulated, and so could be pieced together roughly. The amount of Chunkosaurus was staggering. Thousands and thousands of pieces embedded in the blackened rocks. When enough material had been recovered, Curry had some of the students try to identify any of the remains to find out which creatures had perished here. A single tooth revealed the presence of Dromaeosaurus. Disparate pieces of neck vertebra turned out to be from some large, unknown Asdarchid pterosaur. A Daspletosaurus was identified on the basis of 2 teeth shattered into pieces. Bit of turtle plastron, hadrosaur and ceratopsian skull fragments, lizard toes, etc. The sample of creatures we were turning up was completely random. The only similar sites that Curry could think of were Rancho La Brea, the tar pits, and the Cleveland Lloyd dinosaur quarry. In both of those instances, large herbivores became trapped, either in tar or in mud, which in turn lured in meat-eaters who would become trapped themselves. But both of those sites differed from what we were uncovering. Apart from the lack of the unidentified black rock we were digging in, those sites both have a disproportionate ratio of predators to prey, with the carnivores vastly outnumbering the herbivores. There didn't appear to be any such ratio at the DPF, though it's very difficult to determine based on the fragmentary nature of the remains. Another big difference between the two is the fact that both Rancho La Brea and Cleveland Lloyd are famous for how complete and well-preserved the specimens are. Here it looked like all of the animals, from the smallest insects to the largest dinosaurs, had been crushed to pieces indiscriminately. Whatever happened to them, they were all equal victims of it. And as if things weren't strange enough, some of the students eventually turned up neck vertebra from some kind of plesiosaur. Now, for those of you who've never picked up a dinosaur book since they were 7 years old, plesiosaurs were a group of marine reptiles that lived in the oceans during the Mesozoic era. Finding plesiosaur remains mixed among those of land animals was completely inexplicable. The surrounding rock groups are clearly terrestrial in origin, with no sign of marine depositional environments nearby. All this discovery did was add to the bizarre, jarring juxtaposition of random animals. Land, sea, air. No one was safe, apparently. The rest of the week yielded more questions and no answers. The list of victim species grew, as did our confusion. Our professor, Phil Curry, one of the world's leading dinosaur experts, was left utterly baffled. There was no rhyme or reason to any of these fossils. Imagine if you were taking a walk and stumbled across a mass graveyard where elephants, wolves, storks, horses, and dolphins were all lying dead, their carcasses all mixed up with each other. Add in the fact that all these animals were apparently pulverized into marble-sized pieces in a kind of rock that even seasoned geologists have never seen before, and you can begin to imagine why this was so strange. We, of course, sent samples of the rock to the geochemistry lab back at the University of Alberta. 2 months later, the results have just come in. The rocks contain sizable quantities of mendelevium. There's just one small problem with that. Mendelevium does not occur in nature. Mendelevium is a synthetic element on the periodic table, produced when lighter particles are bombarded together in a particle accelerator. The reason for this is that it has a very short half-life. In other words, it only exists for up to 51 days before decaying into Einsteinium. Chemically, there is absolutely no possible way that mendelevium, an element that has only ever been observed in laboratory conditions, can be found in rocks over 70 million years old. I was, of course, extremely skeptical at first, but the chemist told me that the team had conducted the experiment 10 times in order to make sure they hadn't done something wrong. To the best of their abilities, these rocks truly do contain mendelevium. I'm sending specimens of these rocks out to 3 other labs for independent confirmation. I need to be sure of the results, and of myself, before I take them to Professor Curie. I don't even know what to think about all of this. I feel like I'm within sight of something big, something game-changing, and I don't know what to make of it. Or maybe the results will come back and it will turn out that our lab equipment is broken. I'm sure there's a perfectly simple explanation for all of this. And if there isn't, well, I guess I know what I'll be writing my thesis on, at least.